Hello, so today we're talking about food labels and what to look for in these food labels. I want to help you to become an informed shopper. A few years ago, less than 10 years ago, my main concern in looking at food labels was whether or not it was organic. And as time went by, I started to realize how contaminated the food supply is, and essentially realize the different contaminants such as hormones and antibiotics and pesticides and so on and so forth. And so over the past few years, I've learned a lot, and I want to share some of those things with you in this video. Now, in terms of our food as well, we want to the goal should be to have food that's as clean as possible. That is, food that's without significant contamination. I like to think of food as fuel, like for a car, and we want clean fuel that burns clean, that has minimal or no contaminants, right? For a car, if it's the lower grade fuel, it clogs up the engine and you need to get oil changes more frequently if you use that lower grade fuel. And same way, we should think of our bodies as basically a machine, and we need clean food so that it burns more efficiently. We are able to utilize the energy more efficiently with minimal toxic byproducts. Okay, so let's dive right into the different classifications for food. So the first one, I alluded to it, organic. So the organic label generally means that the food has no pesticides, and also there were no genetically modified organisms utilized in making of that food. Now, pesticides are present in a lot of foods. In fact, I was listening to a talk recently, and they spoke about how more than 50% of persons have what's the name of that chemical from Monsanto again, that pesticide. More than 50% of urine samples tested when they did some sort of study were positive for this pesticide. So pesticides are almost pervasive, and as much as you are not necessarily going to have an immediate side effect, these chemicals can accumulate in the body in little bits over time, and different people respond differently to accumulations of such chemicals. People can have allergic reactions, autoimmune reactions, and so on and so forth. So essentially, we don't want any toxins to accumulate in our body to interfere with the efficient functioning of our bodies, right? So something that's organic means that they utilize no pesticides in growing it, and no genetically modified organisms as well were utilized with processing that food or in producing that food. Now that leads me to the second one, GMO, non-GMO verified. So non-GMO containing means, again, has no genetically modified organisms. Now, there is controversy about whether or not genetically modified foods are dangerous. There's some concern that the genes, genes from these GMO foods can come into and mingle with the genes of the human body. Like I said, there's controversy about it. The jury is out, but the thing is, there's several European countries that have 100% banned non-GMO foods, and so to me, they must know something that is important enough for them to ban these things, and for that reason, I try to avoid non-GMO foods that are that contain genetically modified organisms. Okay. Third, grass-fed. What does it mean, that grass-fed label? That means that the meat, cows, sheep, goat, and so on, it means that these animals were fed grass only, and you would see grass-fed milk, grass-fed butter. These animals grazed only on grass, and grass-fed meats have a better mix of nutrients, a healthier mix of nutrients, I should say, and just overall also a healthier mix of the more beneficial omega-3 fatty acids. Now, I had done a post on this some time ago that now I recently noticed another label, grass-fed but grain finished. So sometimes the animals would be reared on grass, but then closer towards the time of slaughter, they would finish them off with grain, because that enhances the flavor of the meat. That's specifically for meat products. That enhances the flavor, makes it a little more tender, and depending on the type of grass or grain they might give them, it varies. There are subtle variations in the flavor, so that's a new thing as well. And grass-fed but grain finished, also you can look at the farms. Different farms would use grain that's organic and so on and so forth. So many complexities, but ultimately if you see like grass-fed butter, grass-fed milk, and maybe for you, you might be okay, you know, with the sort of natural wild taste of meat. So grass-fed meat as well means that you don't have to worry about these animals being fed random grain, which is not their natural diet. And so with these things, they're going to have like an imbalance of the nutrition and also of the fatty acids. We want more of the omega-3 fatty acids and less of the omega-6 fatty acids. Now another label is hormone-free, and again this is related to milk and meat. So animals that were reared without hormones are better. Now hormones are given, growth hormones are given to cows and probably sheep and goat depending, but you know, and even like maybe chicken. Hormones are given to these animals to speed up their growth. So these animals will mature in like weeks instead of months, like depending, right? And obviously that is not a natural situation. Sometimes the hormones also cause them to be more fatty, and ultimately these hormones, you know, when we talk about beef and so on, growth hormones from beef can get into our system. Hormones are fat soluble, and so eating these animals with the fat and so on, and we ingest that and get these hormones into our system. And it's certainly known that the hormones in animals or food products contributes to early puberty in children, and there are probably a host of other adverse effects of chronic use or chronic ingestion or consumption of meat that was prepared with the help of hormones. Okay, another label is antibiotic free. Again, in relation to meat and milk and eggs, farm animals are given antibiotics to prevent infections, because a lot of times on these feedlots, they're so close to each other that there is easy spread of germs from one animal to the next, and so they load them up with a lot of hormones to keep the bacterial load or the bacterial growth in them and infections down. Another reason why they give antibiotics to livestock and chickens and so on is to help them to grow faster. Now, antibiotics, we know in humans, is like chronic antibiotic use or excessive antibiotic use has been associated with obesity, right, with weight gain, and it has to do with how the antibiotics change the bacterial content in the intestine. So when that balance is off, you have more of the bacteria that are associated with weight gain, and it's the same for farm animals, right, where you give antibiotics and that helps them to get fatter quicker. Okay, so if it says antibiotic free, it means that these animals were not given any antibiotics, and the milk came from cows that did not get any antibiotics. The thing about antibiotics as well in animals is that it can promote the development of superbugs, which are bacteria that are resistant to almost all antibiotics, and then we humans can eat this meat and then catch these multi-drug resistant or superbug bacteria and actually get infections from these. And you would have heard of some of those instances in the news over the years. So antibiotic free. Another label is pasture raised, and this is especially in relation to eggs. So before, there's so many labels of eggs. You can have cage-free eggs, you have free-range eggs, and then there's a pasture-range label. Now, cage eggs, of course, they're just in these tiny cages and they can hardly move because the cages are so small. So that's just not natural because they get no exercise, and that of course helps them to get fat and bigger quicker. Then cage-free simply means that they're not in a cage, but they can still be in these tiny sort of confined pens where there are like lots and lots of birds in this tiny pens. So it's almost as if they are caged because they can hardly move. Then there are free range. There's a free range label where they can move around, but they're still feeding them grain, and they can still give them antibiotics and all these other things. So free range is, a little substandard. Now the best label, the highest grade label obviously the most expensive eggs would be those that are pasture raised, and pasture raised eggs are those from hens that or chicken that can roam freely like back in the day. Basically they would eat worms and bugs and just whatever they feel, and they have a nice big pasture to roam around and eat just as nature intended. And those are the highest quality eggs. They have the best mix of nutrients, and if you look at those eggs too, they have a nice golden yolk. You can tell the quality instantly when you crack them. They have this nice healthy golden rich looking yolk, and those are the best quality eggs. And then lastly, we have the wild caught label, and this is in relation to fish. You can have wild caught fish and farmed fish. And one thing with salmon is one that we tend to buy, but the salmon, sometimes it will say, oh, Alaskan salmon, or it might even say wild Alaskan salmon or pink salmon, but then you have to look around at the back of the label because it will say farmed. So it could be, I don't know, the Alaskan type or wild type or whatever, but it has to say wild caught, okay? And you specifically have to say that. And if you don't see wild caught anyway, you have to look around, and on the ingredients, oftentimes in small print, it will say farm raised salmon. And the thing about farm raised salmon, again, they're sort of in a smaller, like a more confined area, a lot of fish packed together, and they can kind of have germs or just toxins from their excrement in the water, and it's just a poorer quality fish, more potential toxins in the meat, and also just a less healthy mix of nutrients, so not quite as nutritious as the wild caught fish. Okay, salmon, grouper, halibut, all these types of fish, but salmon is a big common one, and most likely when you go to restaurants, it's going to be the farm raised salmon. Now, I'm not going to say for all these, that was the last one, but mostly, we try to cook most of our food, okay? And so when we go to the supermarket, we try to get foods that basically have any of these labels: organic, non-genetically modified organisms, so non-GMO, grass-fed with our milk and butter, and for some of you who eat meat, hormone-free, antibiotic-free, pasture-raised, and wild-caught. And the idea is that you want food that will give you the most bang for your buck. You will get the most collateral benefits from these foods and minimum collateral damage in the way of toxins and antibiotics and whatever else that could accumulate and negatively affect your body. You're not going to be affected immediately, you're not going to feel it, but these chemicals and toxins over time accumulate and can just contribute to aging and just disease and low energy and so on and so forth. Okay, so when you go to the supermarket next time, start paying attention to some of these labels and do your best to make the best choices with food. We're never going to be perfect, but let the good outweigh the bad. Now, I want to just mention again that I'm running the Eat More, Weigh Less challenge again in less than 2 weeks, and this is a challenge to help you essentially learn what to eat to help your body get to optimal weight. And this is, of course, so that you can maintain health going forward and have your body be prepared to handle whatever challenges may come its way. And so for those of you who, you wanted, the challenge will help you to gain control over your cravings, also to sleep better at night, have better mental clarity, have better energy. And of course, we all want to be at the ideal weight overall, because this will decrease the chance of disease basically in the future. So join the Eat More, Weigh Less challenge coming up in less than 2 weeks. This time I'm having it in the evening to accommodate people who work during the daytime. This is the first time I'm having it in the evening. So I hope to see you there, and have a good evening. Thanks for watching, and any questions, just let me know in the comments below.